The morning sun filtered through the thin curtains of the hospital room, painting soft lines of gold across the white sheets. The faint scent of antiseptic mixed with the warm aroma of breakfast rice that James had brought in early. He moved quietly, careful not to wake the woman lying on the bed. "Diep, it's morning already," he said gently, his voice as soft as the light. "Come on, it's time to get up. I'll help you freshen up, then we'll meet the doctor together." Diep blinked her tired eyes open, her pale face brightened by a weak smile. She tried to sit up, but James was already there, steadying her with one arm. His every movement was patient, almost reverent, as if afraid that one wrong touch would cause her pain. "I'm fine," she whispered, her voice trembling. "A little better than yesterday." James nodded. "That's good. The doctor said your condition is improving quickly. We were lucky to bring you here in time." Outside, the corridor was alive with the soft echo of footsteps and distant beeps from the monitors. James turned back toward her, lowering his voice. "The papers for your treatment were a bit complicated," he said. "Your household registration is still linked to your ex-husband's family. But don't worry, I am taking care of everything." Diep looked at him, eyes shimmering. For a moment, she wanted to say something that could carry all the gratitude she felt, but no words seemed enough. Before she could speak, James's phone rang. He answered quickly. "Mom," his tone softened. "Yes, we're in room 315. Diep watched him with surprise. "Your mother?" He smiled. "Yes, she's downstairs with Nee. They came all the way from home to visit us." Her breath caught. 200 kilometers, James. "Why didn't you tell me? They must be exhausted." "I wanted to surprise you," he admitted, "but I guess Mom couldn't wait." Moments later, the sound of light footsteps and a familiar voice echoed from the doorway. "Here you are," said Mrs. Hyen, stepping into the room with a warm smile. Little Nee followed close behind, clutching a small bag of fruit in her hands. "Hello, dear," James's mother greeted Diep kindly. "Are you feeling better today?" Diep sat up straight, her hands nervously clutching the blanket. "I am, thank you, ma'am." Nee ran forward and threw her tiny arms around Diep. "Don't be sick anymore, okay? I miss you so much." Diep's tears finally broke free, falling silently down her cheeks. The tenderness in Nee's voice, the care in James's mother's eyes, it all felt like sunlight after a long winter. For years, she had faced her pain alone, but at that moment, she realized she wasn't alone anymore. Mrs. Hyen gently patted Diep's shoulder. "You must eat well, child. I've asked the doctor to give you the best care possible. A mother knows when someone needs her." James looked at his mother, speechless for a moment. She had traveled to 100 kilometers not only to visit him, but also to make sure that Diep, the woman who had silently entered her son's heart, was treated as family. "I've already arranged for one of the best doctors in the city," Mrs. Hyen continued, her tone firm yet loving. "You don't need to worry about a thing, Diep. Just focus on getting well." Diep tried to hold back her tears, but the emotion was too heavy to contain. "Thank you, Mum," she whispered. "You didn't have to come all this way." James's mother smiled. A mother always knows when her child and the woman he loves need her most. James quietly reached out, taking Diep's trembling hand in his. "You see," he murmured, "you're not alone anymore." Diep's heart tightened, overflowing with emotions she could not name. It wasn't just love that filled her chest, it was belonging. Outside, the sky had turned brighter. The wind brushed against the window, carrying with it the warmth of home and the quiet promise of recovery. For the first time in a long while, Diep closed her eyes, not in pain, but in peace. The soft hum of the air conditioner filled the small hospital room, blending with the gentle chatter of Nee's voice. Afternoon sunlight spilled through the half-closed blinds, turning everything a warm honey gold. The earlier tension had faded, replaced by a quiet comfort that only family could bring. James came back from the cafeteria, his hands carrying several lunch boxes. "Lunch is ready," he said, smiling as Nee ran to take one from him. "We've got rice, soup, and a little fruit for dessert." Mrs. Hyen looked up from the chair beside Diep's bed. "You shouldn't have gone by yourself, James. You've been running around all morning." James shook his head. "It's nothing, Mom. I just wanted to make sure Diep eats something she likes. He placed the tray carefully in front of her, opening each container one by one. The smell of warm food filled the air. Diep hesitated, still a little shy under the gentle gaze of everyone around her. "Eat, my dear," said Mrs. Hyen kindly. "You need strength to get better." Ni clapped her hands and pulled her chair close to Diep. "I'll eat with you, so you won't be lonely." Diep couldn't help but smile. "All right, little one. Let's eat together." The room became lively with the small sounds of chopsticks, the rustle of paper napkins, and the cheerful laughter of the child. It felt more like a family lunch at home than a meal in a sterile hospital. "See, Diep, look," Ni said, her mouth full of rice. "I finished one whole bowl." James laughed softly. "That's my brave girl. You eat better than your uncle here." Mrs. Hyen chuckled. "James, you should eat too. You haven't touched your food since morning." "I will, Mom," he replied, but his eyes stayed on Diep, making sure she ate each spoonful. Diep finally put her chopsticks down and looked at them, all the woman who had traveled so far, the little girl giggling beside her, and the man whose quiet presence had become her peace. Her throat tightened with emotion. "I don't know how to thank you," she said softly. "You've all done so much for me." Mrs. Hyen reached over and took her hand. "You don't have to thank us, Diep. When someone is dear to my son, she is dear to me as well. Family takes care of one another." The words struck Diep. For years, Diep had been alone, fighting, surviving, pretending to be strong. But now, surrounded by warmth, she felt her heart slowly healing. James looked at her, his voice low but steady. "We're here for you, Diep, always." Outside the window, the light shifted as the afternoon deepened into golden evening. The hospital no longer felt cold or distant. It felt like a place where something fragile yet beautiful was beginning to grow. Ni leaned against Diep's arm, yawning. "I'm sleepy," she murmured. Diep brushed the girl's hair gently. "Then sleep, little one. You've had a long day." Mrs. Hyen smiled as she watched them. "She's right. We should let Diep rest soon." James stood, gathering the empty boxes. "I'll clean this up, Mom. Thank you for coming. You have no idea how much it means to both of us." His mother smiled knowingly. "I think I do." She turned to Diep once more. "Rest well, child. Tomorrow will be a better day." When the door finally closed behind them, Diep lay back on the pillow, listening to the quiet hum of the corridor outside. The scent of jasmine soap lingered faintly from James's hands as he tucked the blanket around her. "James," she whispered, "your mother is so kind." He smiled. "She just followed her heart. I think she already sees you as part of the family." Diep closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. Again soft, silent, but this time full of gratitude. For the first time in years, she wasn't crying from loneliness. She was crying because she finally felt loved. The hospital had grown quiet. The sun had long set, leaving behind the silver light of the moon that spilled gently across the white floor tiles. The rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor blended with the faint chirping of crickets outside the window. James sat on the small couch beside Diep's bed, his jacket folded neatly on his lap. He hadn't left since his mother and Ni returned home that afternoon. The silence between them was soft, comforting, a silence that didn't need to be filled. Diep turned her head slightly, her eyes finding his. "James," she whispered, her voice fragile but sincere. "Why are you still here? It's getting late." He smiled faintly. "Because I want to be here when you fall asleep. You've been through too much alone." Her heart trembled at his words. "I'm used to it," she said softly. "Being alone, taking care of myself. No one ever stayed long enough to worry." James leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. "That's what hurts me the most," he admitted. "You've carried everything by yourself for too long. You never had someone to share the burden." Diep lowered her gaze, her fingers tracing the edge of the blanket. "I didn't want to depend on anyone. Depending means risking heartbreak. And I've had enough heartbreak for a lifetime." For a moment, James didn't speak. Then he reached out, his warm hand covering hers. "You're not a burden, Diep. You're someone worth protecting, worth loving." Her breath caught. The words sank deep into her chest like drops of rain after a long drought. I'm not perfect, she murmured, tears threatening again. I have a past I'm not proud of. A marriage that broke me. A life that left scars you can't see. I don't care about your past, James said quietly, his voice steady but tender. I only care about the woman sitting in front of me now. The one who still smiles even after all the storms. A tear slipped down her cheek. James gently brushed it away with his thumb. His touch was careful, respectful, as if she were something fragile, precious. You don't have to be strong all the time, he whispered. Let me be strong for you, at least once. Her chest tightened. The wall she had built for years began to crumble, piece by piece. James, I'm scared, she confessed. Scared that one day you'll realize I'm not enough, that you'll walk away like everyone else. He shook his head. The only thing I'm afraid of is losing you before I can prove that I never will. The room was silent again, heavy with unspoken emotion. Outside, a faint wind rustled the leaves, brushing softly against the window. Diep finally spoke again, her voice trembling. When your mother came today, I felt something I haven't felt in years. It was warmth. It was love. It was home. James smiled, his eyes soft. Then hold on to that feeling, Diep, because that's what I want to give you, not just love, but a home where you'll never have to be afraid again. She looked at him for a long moment, searching his eyes for any trace of doubt. There was none. Only sincerity, calm, and quiet strength. James, she whispered, her voice breaking. Thank you for not giving up on me. He leaned closer, pressing a light kiss on her forehead. Never, he murmured. Sleep now. Tomorrow, we start again together. As he turned off the bedside lamp, the room fell into a soft darkness. Diep closed her eyes, her heart still trembling, but this time with hope. Outside, the moon hung quietly above the city, and for the first time in a long while, Diep drifted into sleep knowing she was safe, knowing that love had finally found its way back to her. The next morning, the sound of hurried footsteps echoed down the hospital corridor. Diep opened her eyes just as the door swung open. James's mother entered with a calm but serious look, followed by an older man in a white coat. Good morning, dear Mrs. Hyen said gently. This is Dr. Fan. He's one of the best specialists in the city. I asked him to come and check on you. Diep sat up, her hands nervously twisting the bedsheet. You didn't have to, ma'am. I'm already feeling better. James came to her side. It's okay, Diep. Let the doctor take a look. Dr. Fan examined her carefully, asked a few questions, and then turned to James and his mother. She's recovering well, he said slowly, but her body is very weak from exhaustion and stress. If she keeps pushing herself, it could affect her long-term health. Diep lowered her head, silent. Mrs. Hyen walked over and took her hand. From now on, you'll rest properly. No more worrying alone, understood? Tears welled in Diep's eyes. I don't know how to repay you all, Mrs. Hyen smiled warmly. By getting well and by staying beside my son. That's all I want. James looked at his mother, then at Diep. His eyes softened, full of love and quiet promise. As the doctor left, sunlight filled the room once again. Diep leaned against James's shoulder, whispering, maybe, I was never meant to fight alone. He smiled. No, Diep, not anymore. And in that gentle morning light, surrounded by care and warmth, Diep finally felt what it meant to belong, to be truly loved. Love is not only found in grand gestures or perfect moments, it is found in quiet care, in the warmth of a mother's touch, and in the patience of someone who chooses to stay. Through Diep's tears and struggles, we learn that no matter how strong we try to be, everyone needs a place to rest, a person to lean on, and a heart that truly understands. James's mother showed that a mother's instinct can reach beyond blood. She saw Diep not as a stranger, but as family. Her kindness reminded us that compassion can heal wounds deeper than medicine ever could. The story teaches that healing begins when we allow love to enter, when we stop fighting alone, and when we accept that being cared for is not weakness, it's human. True love, like that between James and Diep, isn't about perfection or promises. It's about standing together through pain, trust, and forgiveness. And sometimes, the smallest act of kindness can change a broken heart forever.